Most people think Red Bull is a beverage company. They see the silver can, they see the blue bowl, and they think, okay, they make energy drinks. But here's the crazy part. That's actually a total lie. If you look at how they actually spend their time and their billions, the drink is almost like a side quest. It's a souvenir. In reality, Red Bull is a global media empire that just happens to have a very efficient way of funding its own stunts. And if you think I'm exaggerating, wait until you see how the math actually works. Because what they've built isn't just a business. It's a loop that basically forces you to buy into a lifestyle before you even realize you're being sold to. But to understand why they're winning, we have to look at the first big glitch in the matrix of traditional advertising. Most companies spend their entire lives begging for your attention. They buy 30-second spots during the Super Bowl, or they pay millions to have their logo plastered on a stadium wall for 5 seconds of airtime. Red Bull thinks that's a sucker's game. Instead of paying a middleman to show you their logo, Red Bull just is the event. Think about the Red Bull soapbox race or Red Bull crashed ice. When you watch these, you aren't watching a commercial for Red Bull. You're watching an extreme sports event, but guess who owns the cameras? Red Bull. Who owns the track? Red Bull. Who owns the rights to every single second of footage? You guessed it. The expectation for a big brand is to write a fat check to a TV network and hope people don't go to the kitchen for a snack during the break. The reality for Red Bull is that they are the TV network. They don't buy commercials because they don't need to. The entire 2-hour broadcast is, technically, a Red Bull advertisement, but it doesn't feel like one. It feels like entertainment. Here's where it gets wild. Since they own the event, they actually make money from other sponsors who want to be there. Imagine being so good at advertising that your competitors in the space pay you for the privilege of being seen next to you. They've turned a massive marketing expense into a literal revenue stream. But owning the event is just the physical side of things. The real genius, the part that makes their competitors like Monster or Rockstar scratch or start look like they're playing with blocks, is what happens after the event is over. Because that's when the media house kicks in, and that's where the real money is hiding. Back in 2007, Red Bull did something that made 0 sense to the beverage industry. They launched Red Bull Media House. Most drink companies hire an ad agency. Red Bull became a production studio. They treat their marketing like a Netflix series. If you go to the Red Bull TV app or their YouTube channel, you'll see high-budget documentaries, live sports, and music features. They aren't just filming guys jumping off cliffs to sell cans. They are selling that footage to TV networks globally. When a news station wants to show a clip of a Red Bull stunt, they often have to license that high-definition footage. People expect Red Bull to spend money to be seen. In reality, they are making a product, content, that is so good people pay to watch it. It's the ultimate double dip. They get the brand exposure for free, and then they get a check from a streaming platform or a TV network for the right to air the commercial. This is where the business model flips on its head. Most companies have a marketing budget that is a black hole. Money goes in, and hopefully sales come out. Red Bull Media House is a profit center. They've managed to turn their advertising into a product that pays for itself. But you might be wondering, how do they keep the costs down? If you're filming global events 24/7, that should cost a fortune, right? Well, that brings us to their content multiplier, the secret to how one single moment of adrenaline can feed their marketing machine for an entire decade. Red Bull doesn't just film an event and walk away. They are the masters of recycling human bravery. They take one single athlete, one single stunt, and they slice it into 1,000 different pieces of content that live forever. Take a mountain bike descent. They'll film it with 4K drones, GoPros on the helmet, and high-speed ground cameras. One afternoon of filming creates a 10-minute documentary, a 30-second raw POV clip for TikTok, a behind-the-scenes tech breakdown, and high-res photos for magazine covers. The expectation is that you need a new idea every week to stay relevant. The reality is that Red Bull creates tentpole moments that are so visually stunning, they can keep resharing them for 5 years and it still feels fresh. They aren't chasing the algorithm. They are feeding it a constant stream of high-octane assets they already paid for years ago. Because they own the athletes and the production team, the cost per view for Red Bull is significantly lower than any of their rivals. While a competitor is paying $5 million for a single Super Bowl spot, Red Bull is getting 500 million views across 3 years for the same price, and they own the rights to all of it forever. Now, this all sounds like a lot of work just to sell a drink, and that leads us to the most uncomfortable question in the room. What is actually inside that can? Because once you see the profit margins on the liquid itself, you'll realize why they can afford to throw people out of weather balloons. Here's a secret the beverage industry doesn't want you to think about too hard. Water is cheap, sugar is cheap, caffeine is cheap. When you strip away the fancy silver and blue aluminum, the actual liquid inside a Red Bull can cost almost nothing to produce. We're talking pennies. Industry estimates suggest it costs Red Bull roughly $0.09 to $0.15 to actually manufacture a single can. But when you walk into a gas station, you're dropping $3 or $4 for that same can. That is a markup of over 2,000%. To put that in perspective, if a car had the same markup as a Red Bull can, a basic Toyota would cost you over $1 million. The expectation is that Red Bull is a manufacturing company, that They have massive factories and secret labs. The reality? Red Bull doesn't even make their own drink. They outsource the entire production and bottling. Red Bull's only job is to sell the idea of the drink. Because their profit margins are so massive, Red Bull doesn't need to sell billions of cans to stay afloat. They only need to sell a fraction of what they produce to cover their costs. Everything else, every extra cent, is funneled directly back into their crazy stunts. They've essentially built a money printer fueled by caffeine and sugar that pays for their private air force. But if the drink is just cheap sugar water, why do we keep buying it? Well, that's because Red Bull isn't in the business of quenching your thirst. They're in the business of hacking your brain. Red Bull is the world's best example of identity marketing. They don't tell you the drink tastes good. Instead, they tell you what kind of person you are if you hold that can. They're selling gives you wings, the idea that you are part of the elite, the daring, and the adventurous. Look at who they sponsor. It's never the guy playing it safe. It's the guy jumping a motorcycle over a football field. When you're at your desk at 3 p.m. feeling like a zombie and you reach for a Red Bull, you aren't just buying caffeine. You're subconsciously trying to buy a piece of that adrenaline-fueled life. Most brands try to convince you their product is better than the competition. Red Bull doesn't care about that. The reality is they've spent 30 years making the brand synonymous with extreme. They don't want to be the best tasting drink. They want to be the only drink that exists in the world of high-stakes action. This psychology is so strong that Red Bull has actually created a placebo effect for Stratus. In studies, people have reported feeling more alert and focused just by seeing the logo. They've successfully linked a physical sensation to a psychological identity, and this all leads to the single most insane thing a private company has ever done. It wasn't just a marketing stunt. It was a scientific mission that stopped the entire world for a few minutes. It's the moment Red Bull proved they weren't just a drink company, they were a space program. In 2012, the world stopped. 8 million people watched a live stream as Felix Baumgartner stood on the edge of a capsule 24 miles above the Earth. He stepped off, broke the sound barrier with his own body, and landed safely. It was called Red Bull Stratus. This wasn't a stunt, it was an aerospace mission. Red Bull spent an estimated $50 million on this one event. For those few minutes, Red Bull wasn't marketing, they were the center of the scientific world. The earned media, the free coverage, was worth over $500 million. They spent $50 million to get $500 million worth of the most prestigious advertising on the planet. But here's the kicker. Red Bull didn't just get the fame. They owned the scientific data. They owned the footage. They owned the story. While NASA was facing budget cuts, a drink company was the one pushing the limits of human flight. How does a company that throws people out of space balloons actually stay profitable? It's a perpetual motion machine. Cans fund content. They sell a drink with 2,000% margins to get a massive pile of cash. Content builds. Brand. They use that cash to fund insane stunts and own the media rights. Brand sells lifestyle. That content makes the brand look like the coolest thing on earth. Lifestyle sells more cans. You buy the drink because you want to be part of that world. So here's the truth. Red Bull is not an energy drink company. They are a world-class media and lifestyle empire that just happens to have a very efficient way of funding itself by selling silver cans. They've turned the entire world into their playground, and we're all just watching the show, usually with a can in our hand. The next time you see that Red Bull logo, don't think energy drink. Think about the most sophisticated business loop ever created. They've mastered the art of making you feel something first and selling to you second. And honestly, it's brilliant. Because while everyone else is fighting for a 30-second spot on your TV, Red Bull is busy making history. But look, Red Bull is the perfect example of a brand that knows exactly how to stay ahead of the curve. They keep evolving, they keep taking risks, and they never stop making you feel like you're part of something legendary. But not every giant gets it right. In fact, some of the biggest names in history, companies that basically defined our childhoods, are doing the exact opposite. They're getting lazy, they're playing it safe, and they're losing the very magic that made them famous in the first place. If you want to see what happens when a massive empire starts to crumble because they stop taking risks, you need to watch this video on why Disney sucks now. It's a deep dive into how the king of storytelling turned into a factory for homework cinema and why the magic might actually be gone for good.